like to welcome everyone to this month's Repairers Realm. This month we're going to be talking about paint booth and fresh air filtration system overviews. So just want to remind everyone that you can submit questions if you're watching it live in the tab to the right, and if you're watching this on demand, you can submit those questions anytime at repairersrealm@i-car.com. And I am Scott Van Hooley with the Repairability Technical Support Team at iCar. And joining me today is Luis.
Thank you, Scott. Yeah, my name is Luis Martinez. I'm the subject matter expert from the Chicago Tech Center.
And my name is TJ O'Rourke. I'm one of the subject matter experts here at the Appleton Tech Center.
And joining us today is going to be Tony Larimer from SATA. And we had all intentions of Tony being here live, but in true Midwest fashion for February, a snowstorm's bearing down on us, and we didn't want Tony to have to drive into the heart of darkness on the way home. So he's joining us virtually today. So Tony, why don't you give us a brief introduction of your background?
Yeah, hi, I'm Tony Larimer. I'm the Director of Sales and Marketing for Dan-Am Company. We're the importer here in the United States and for Puerto Rico for SATA for since the early 80s. I've been here since 1996 and certainly happy to be here with iCar today.
So Tony, let's just start walking through everybody. I know we have a PowerPoint that we can share, and let's just start talking about some of the advancements in the air filtration for the paint booth and even the fresh air systems.
Well, some of the biggest needs have happened over the last few years. Of course, we've seen a lot more move towards waterborne. And when we move towards waterborne, the requirements for clean air have greatly increased for paint. In the old days, we had a lot more solvent in solvent-borne base coat that could wash away some of those sins when we had oil in droplet form or even into vapor form in our airlines. It could be washed away with the extra reducer or thinner that we had in the paints. So today we don't have that, as well as clear coats today have changed a lot, where we're spraying clear coats that are mixed 2-to-1 with a hardener or 4-to-1 with a hardener, maybe as much as 10% solvents rather than 30, 40, 50% solvents like we used to have. So clear coats, although the molecular structure of them had to change over the years because we've eliminated VOCs by eliminating some of that solvent, that just means that now we don't have the extra solvent in there to wash away some of that oil and debris inside clear that affects those molecules. So by having that being done, today, the molecular structure of these clears is so much better. We've got a lot smaller, I would just say we'll use a cup like this, a lot smaller size molecules. So in the old days, if you filled this cup with super balls, that would be what the molecules look like. And wherever those touched, that was where clear linked and gave us durability. Well, today we don't have that. We have BB size molecules in here. And with BB size molecules, there's millions more places where they cross-link. But in between those older molecules where there were super balls, let's say size, you had solvent in between each of those that would wash away some of the oil. Well, today with the, let's say, BBs or birdshot size molecules in this cup, you have a million more places where they link, so it's more durable, more flexible, but you also don't have all that solvent in between those molecules to wash it. So it became more and more important to get to a point where we had cleaner air, so we're not getting debris and getting paint job failures. But on top of that, safety has become very, very important. We use a lot more isocyanates than ever. We're using a lot of chemicals still in paint, in clear coat, even in waterborne technology. There's resins, there's everything that we don't need on our skin. We don't need it in our eyes. We don't need it in our hair. And of course, we don't need that to get through your skin internally where it affects each and every organ that we have. So in the SATA line, we have filtration that gives us breathing air quality that you can use for, that also gives you breathing air quality for not just breathing, but also for painting, so your paintwork can be much, much cleaner. So I think if we go on to the next slide, we'll talk a little bit about some of the advantages. The biggest thing is Filters are not always an inexpensive purchase, but you want to make sure you get one that's going to do what you need in a shop. The SATA filters are a long time investment. We have people that have been using some of our earlier models, the 300 series and 400 series, for 20, 25 plus years, and they still work fine with proper maintenance. And with that proper maintenance comes the clean air that we need. We also have a couple of options. We've got a 500 series filter and a 200 series filter. The 500 series is 135 CFM, as you can see pictured here, but we also have a 200 series filter that's a 70 CFM unit for those that may have a smaller compressor, 10 horse, etc., where they're not making 70 CFM. They might be making 40, 50 CFM. We have a filter for that. But within each of those filters, we have a variety. So we have subcategories. So we can do just a single stage filter. So if you just want to keep air clean, with an automatic drain valve, like in the first stage, just clean air for air tools out in the open shop, for running pneumatic mixing machines, etc. That works fine. It removes down to 5 micron. We have a 2-stage filter where if I want to spray solvent-borne base coat, I could spray with a 2-stage filter that has the first stage auto drain system. The second stage, it has down to 0.01 micron fine filter that gives us 99.998% clean air to keep clean for paint. But if I want to breathe that air, then I have the option of wearing a charcoal cartridge on my hood waist belt, so that I have clean enough air for breathing and for spraying solvent. But if I'm going to be in waterborne, we have a 3rd stage, which is containing carbon. And the nice thing is, if you're wearing or using that, you can now breathe the air with only wearing a small adjustment valve on your hood belt to control that. So it gives us several options that we can make work in any shop. But the biggest advantages are we need filtration to give us fine particle separation, and with SATA, when we go to that 3-stage, we're all the way down to 0.005 micron, very, very clean. We want it to give us a high air volume. We have up to 135 CFM in our 500 series filter, or even 70 CFM in our 200 series, which gives us plenty of air volume to run multiple tools, breathing hoods, air coolers, HVLP technology. All of that stuff runs very well through either of those filters. And then we want it clean, and as I said, down to that 0.005 microns, as well as we want low maintenance. And we're going to talk about maintenance on these filters in the next couple of minutes. Now, with breathing air quality for paint, we also have clean enough air that we can choose which of our SATA hoods we want to run. We have a newer version, the Vision 5000, which is incredibly comfortable, and we have options to run air coolers or air warmers with that. We have an older version called the SATA Vision 2000. Great system. You can either one of them. You can see very, very well. But what's most important is both of those are approved by NIOSH in a loose-fitting hood category. And in that loose-fitting hood category, it means that they're positive pressure hood. They have a simple tear-off on the face of it that is your shield. So you don't have a second layer underneath. There's no plastic or glass lens that you have to clean or worry about getting scratches or overspray on that you can't see through and then magnify it with a tear-off. So it's incredibly clean, incredibly lightweight, and it is something that protects the painters very well. So you're not getting it on your face. Even your neck is covered, your hair, your eyes. Nothing's absorbing what we're spraying, and it is pulling air from outside the paint booth going through a filter. So we're breathing that clean air. Let's take a little bit of a look at what we're trying to eliminate. So we'll go to the next slide following that one. So what we want air to have a perfect paint job, you have to have clean air. Air is our primary source for both pulling paint out of a spray gun and for atomization. You need it to be clean, free from dust, dirt, debris, rust, silicone, all of those kind of things. We need it to be dry, free from condensate, and even into oil vapor size, because vapors, as I mentioned earlier, can still affect your waterborne base coats and your clear coats because it doesn't allow them to stick to each other. Waterborne base coat, as you know, when it gets any kind of oil near it or contaminants. It doesn't give you fish eyes like we used to get with solvent. It gives you more of a look of blotchiness because the base coat tries to separate or run away from the contamination. Last, we want it to have sufficient air volume, and you get sufficient pressure at your gun and constant pressure if you have that. But to look back at that one word up above, and the first thing is when we hear the word silicone in a body shop, most often we think of the detail guy or tire cleaners or whatever could be used. But that's not typically where silica comes from. So let's go to the next slide. When you look at these pictures, what I want you to notice is desiccant. What this desiccant does is it comes in a jug like this, and they do a great job. Most of the companies now decided to go to a canister that has a frosted look, so you don't notice that when you put your fingers inside of here, and even on this lid, if I wipe this, I get a white dust, and all through the inside of this there's this white silica dust, which is a contaminant. And on all the desiccant filters, or a majority of them that you see out there, you'll see where they are the last stage in line. So you have a water trap and then an oil coalescer, and then you'll see the desiccant being last, and there's no filtration afterwards to protect those particles from getting into your paintwork. And just for an example of what desiccant does, and that slide that they showed you earlier shows it pretty well, but what I want to give you a little bit of a example. So I'm going to add about an ounce of water to the desiccant that I just poured out of that other jug into this cup. And when I add this, you'll start hearing right away, I'm going to cover it up, because what happens is these start to snap and pop, and I'll try and hold it close to my microphone. Hopefully you can all hear that, but it sounds like pop rocks. And so what that does is those snap and pop and break, and they're flying all over inside of here, which is why I put a lid on, because I don't want them jumping out. So every time they expand, when they absorb water, they break. And as they shatter, it starts to cause little tiny particulates and pieces to get all over inside. And when those end up into your paintwork, you'll see little tiny pinholes on a hood and or on a flat or on a side, and people are looking at them thinking they have solvent pop, and they'll call their tech rep and say, I'm having solvent pop issues. And many times if you magnify that and look, there's a shiny little piece in there, and it's desiccant that broke. One other thing you'll note, I don't know if you can see it on this screen, but this cup is fogging up completely because as this is snapping and popping, this has gotten very, very warm. All of the desiccant in here gets hot as it shatters, and it gets warm, and it releases that moisture eventually back up in. So once everything is saturated, it just releases the moisture again anyway. But the one thing you can do is if I take this off and I put my finger inside of here, I'm getting hundreds of little gritty pieces of silica that are the fractured pieces, and that's what we're filtering with. So we don't use that. We go a whole different direction when we want to have clean air. A lot of that starts with your plumbing, but what the next slide will show you is another warning about all of the major brands that use silica have had to put these warnings on, whether it's RTI or Tsunami or DeVilbiss. They've had to put these warnings on because silica, when it's mixed with the oils and can start causing benzene gas, which is a known carcinogen, as well as silicon dioxide. When you start mixing that with the humidity together with the oils and vapors that are on them, it can cause some severe health issues. So if you're using a silica gel filter, you can't breathe that air. So you need to run a separate filtration system. So we say don't use a desiccant, go with this system. It gives me clean air for painting and spraying. We'll click on the next slide. One of the other downfalls we'll see on some of the filters that are out there to keep some of their in their oil coalescers, to keep some of the debris from going on, they add a foam liner around the outside of some of the media, and that breaks down when you get it in the surface contacted with oil and moisture. Eventually can break down. You'll see these little strands come out of that filter, or when you take it apart to finally change cartridges, you'll find these little pieces that are in there that end up in your airline. So we avoid that as well. We'll move on to take a look. Let's take a look at the inside. We can actually move one more slide. And when you see this one, you'll notice there's 3 stages on a this filter that we're talking about. In the first stage, that yellow piece that you see is actually a water cyclone. It's threaded at the top. It's got a shape to that yellow canister that allows the air to rotate. And as that rotates, it throws all the particles to the outside where they're drained at the bottom of that filter canister with a fully automatic drain valve. And that drain valve eliminates air whether you have 10 psi on it or 50 or 70 or 90, whatever. It will continue to drain and evacuate the moisture and large particulates down to 5 micron. Inside that yellow canister, there is a knob at the bottom that has you screw loose from the yellow canister, and it has a 5 micron sintered bronze element on the inside that can be cleaned once every 6 months with thinner or acetone, whatever's legal to use in your area. Clean it, use a soft brush, scrub it, blow it out from the inside out, and put it back in once every 6 months. This one, again, that first stage is auto drain, which is very important. We'll move on to the next slide. You'll see a little bit the cyclone action on the right is what this new 584 system is. In the past, we had a white cyclone on all of our 200 series and our 400 series. And what we found with that was the air sped up at the beginning, then it slowed down and it sped up again, and it caused a little bit of disruption in airflow. So on this new 500 series filter, we made sure that it keeps a consistent airflow from the top to the bottom of that, which lets the airflow through the filter consistently. So let's go on to the next slide. The second stage in this filter is, as I mentioned earlier, will filter the air down to 99.998% clean. You change it after 6 months. This new 500 series filter has a much larger surface area than even in our 200 series or our 400 series before. So the surface area is much cleaner. You'll notice at the bottom of that second cartridge, it's blue, and at the top it's blue. What you'll also note is on the top of these filters, there is a blue dot over that canister, and on the first stage where there was yellow, there's a yellow line on the filter. On the blue one, there's a blue line on the filter canister, so that it's pretty hard to mix up which stage each cartridge goes in. But that one in that second stage is suitable for spraying solvent-borne base coat. It'll work with a positive pressure full hood like ours with a carbon belt unit. And so that is all you would need in a solvent shop. However, if you have more than one painter and you don't want to have to change that belt unit on each individual painter, we would go to the next picture, which I'll show you is a 3-stage. And in that third stage, there's a full-length carbon cartridge in here that is also good for 6 months. And then you can hook up multiple painters through your air system. Everybody just wears just a simple regulator on their belt rather than having to change individual carbons. Smaller regulator, lighter weight, more comfortable. But this new cartridge in this 500 series is a sintered element, much safer, much longer life than the carbon cartridges that we even had in our previous filters or in some of our smaller filters like the 200 series. So those are the 3 cartridges. I'd like to just pop up the next slide. And so again, just review, we have a higher absorption rate because of the new sintered element in the carbon stage, which is good down to 0.005 micron. We also have 135 CFM capability on this 500 series filter. And there's on the filter itself, you'll notice on the picture on the left side, there's a filter timer. That comes with each of the cartridges. You get one in there and it just slides into a slot on the face of the filter, and you press a button on the bottom. And in 6 months, there's a red line that absolutely fills that whole filter timer all the way to the top, and it lets you know it's time to change your cartridges. So it's just one more way to know it's easy to change, and we'll show you a little bit on maintenance here. The other thing I want you to see is that maintenance-free bayonet style lock. So if we could, let's come back to taking a look at just the filter I've got in front of me here. And I want to show you how easy these are to change. So with each of these canisters, they're just a simple click and release. So when I take these off, you can see the cartridges come out with this haptic system on the top. They just, when you get your new one, they're packaged in a box, obviously with cellophane. You take the cellophane off, and this just drops inside, and that that is how you change a cartridge. On the next one here, the fine filter, it's a much larger filter cartridge than in the past. All of the air goes through the inside of this cartridge and it blows through from the inside out. So if you pull this out and look at it and go, oh, it's clean on the outside, well, it may be, but all the debris is on the inside of this. And again, that just drops back into this canister, and all of our canisters are aluminum and polished so that they don't have the rusting that we get on a steel cartridge. The last stage, which would actually be the first stage on the filter, is the one with the water cyclone. Now this just has a knob on the bottom that spins out, and this 5-micron element is the one that you clean with a soft brush and thinner. Blow it out and put it back in. There's no O-rings to change. There's no seals to change. And it just drops back inside this first stage with the automatic drain. And it does have the option, if you want to manually drain this, you can press up on it and it will drain manually, but you don't need to do that. Inside this filter, there is a big rubber seal up on the inside, and that is easy to check. You just feel it with your fingers and see that it's in place so that it didn't stick to the top of the cartridge. So it's easy to maintain these. There's nothing else to replace. You'll see on this filter, there's a place here where there's bolt holes and slots and things, so it's really simple to fasten the filter to the wall. This thing is reversible, so I can take out little screws that are underneath this filter and reverse the bracket on this. So I can take this gauge that's on the front, put it to the rear, reverse the bracket so that if my air can't come through from left to right like it needs to because of a placement in my booth or outside the booth or wherever an airline is, I can reverse the filter and run the air correctly through it. But it's reversible. So that's a pretty simple. I'll show you again how easy it is to put back together. You just simply prop the canister back up inside. When you turn it, it clicks.
One question.
And you know when it clicks, you can feel it and you can hear it. So I'll try and be quiet. It just clicks and you know it's properly installed.
A question, Tony, for you. So
Yep.
let's say on a shop that has water-based paint and one guy's spraying
Yes.
in one booth, you have multiple painters, and one guy's
Yep.
spraying, and then you have another guy that already sprayed and he's trying to dry his paint and he's got one of those blowers. Would that be restricted? Would that be he'll be able to?
Well, yeah, that's a great question. We a lot of blowers, there's some out there that use 20 CFM. SATA has one called a dry jet that uses 9 CFM, but you start taking 10, 20 CFM and blowers, it can affect it. But what's nice about this filtration system is they're big enough where we would recommend you mount the filters inline outside the paint booths. So not one in every booth, and you shouldn't have your filter in there anyway, but mount it in line and then through T's or whatever mount after your filter coming out of the 1/2-inch pipe thread. Go back up to 3/4-inch piping and run it to your different booths. So if you have 2 booths or 3 booths, or you've got somebody even just plugging a fitting in outside the booth blowing something off, you should have plenty of air volume. If your compressor's large enough, obviously you run decent sized plumbing, which should be in a looped format. This filter will handle up to 4 technicians, and we'll look at that here in just a second in another slide, with full breathing hoods and HVLP spray guns. So great question.
Nice.
I got a quick question for you too, Tony.
Yep.
It looks like when you pull those off, the filters pop in and out, very low maintenance.
Yep.
Anything you have to do inside those aluminum containers before putting the new filter in it?
Well, if you would open it up and you have a lot of oily debris in there, I would definitely clean them with maybe a waterborne wax and grease remover or solvent to clean those canisters out and blow them dry and put them back in. If it's just a little bit of oil, you can just use soapy water, and clean it out. But that's all there should be for maintenance on those.
Yeah, seeing you just kind of demonstrate how easy they come apart and the filters come out looks very, very low maintenance.
Yeah, I love it, and especially because here in just our own facility, we've got a few of these in different locations, but we've also got a couple of the older ones, which had a series of threads that you had to thread loose, and then each cartridge had an O-ring on each end you had to change. And so when we take a look at this, if someone's saying, I think I'd like the smaller filter, that's all I really need, I would suggest taking a look at the 500 series, just because the maintenance time on this is so much easier. And because we're only changing the carbon twice a year instead of 4 times a year like on the other filters, because those carbons only last 3 months and this one lasts 6. It's, the maintenance time is a lot better, as well as the cost of replacement is much lower.
Yeah, I know from my past experience, you never think about all the contaminants. You work in a shop and they decide to switch from solvent to water-based, and you never think about changing the filters or looking at your supplied air and thinking how you get contamination out of that.
Well, and I think that, like we said, all of us, in this room, we've been at this a bit, and we remember the days where we had a lot more solvent, and it helped to eliminate some of those issues. And today we're seeing that with material costs being higher, where redos get very expensive, labor costs higher. Shops don't need to be redoing paint jobs for contamination. We should do everything we can to keep their booth clean inside, keep their spray guns clean, but keeping their air clean, because air is your biggest expense. I mean, energy wise, running a compressor nonstop because you have air leaks, or you have faulty filtration that are leaking and wasting air. That's expensive to run those compressors, and redoing vehicles is an expense that most painters don't need, and most shops don't need. So this is one way to help eliminate that.
All right, so let's continue on with the PowerPoint.
Yeah, if we could skip ahead to another slide, we'll probably go to the next one. This is a little closer look at what that filter timer looks like and what the cartridges looks like, but we can skip ahead. One thing as a resource that you can use, if you go to YouTube, we have a YouTube channel. So if you go to youtube.com and then you search by SATA by Dan Am, so as you can see in point 2, it'll pull up a search bar in there, and in that same search bar where you type SATA by Dan Am, you can just type in filter 500, and all these different videos are available. So everything we talked about, from reversing the filter to adding multiple, where we could add multiple manifolds to these, to if you buy a 2-stage and you want to upgrade to a 3-stage, you can retrofit the 3rd carbon stage. All those videos are there, so it's just something to take a look at. The next one I showed you already, where we have the seals underneath and how easy it is to screw to the wall. We showed that bracket, so I do want to go to the next one so you can see the differences in the 2 series filters. The 500 series filter, again, is a 135 CFM filter at 87 pounds of line pressure. That will handle a max air pressure, as you can see on the bottom under that filter, of 218 pounds, where the 200 series, which is our older version, which is threaded on canisters, has the 3-stage, but it also has the carbon that needs to be replaced 4 times a year. That one is max CFM of 70. Which is still larger than most of the filters that are out there, because you're seeing a lot out there of 25 to max 50 CFM filters being sold. And this one still has a lot of air volume, but max pressure is 145 on this one. So that may or may not be a reason to look at another one. So let's go to the next slide. On the next slide, that you can see again, 500 series filter, 135 CFM, max pressure of 218. When we break it down with a painter using an HVLP spray gun at 15 CFM, Vision 5000 hood, which can range from 6 to 15 CFM depending on where you set it, but typically they run in that 10 CFM range. Add a 6 CFM air cooler to it, you can be looking at an average of 30 CFM per technician. This 500 series filter would allow you to run 4 techs using all that equipment. If we go to that 200 series at 70 CFM, we only get, using the same equipment, we can only do 2 technicians. So this may be another reason to take a look at the bigger one. Now, if we go on to the next slide, you'll see all the variety that we have. The the filter with the regulation built in is our 584, but to the right of that, you'll see the 584 line filter. This is more and more common because we really would suggest you put the filtration in line before the paint area, run the air lines into this and then up into your loop that surrounds your paint shop. That way you have clean air for everything in that shop. We can also do a 2-stage, like I mentioned, or a 1-stage. We can do the single stage or the 2-stage as line filters, so without regulators. And then that right corner at the bottom is a carbon filter that you could retrofit to a 2-stage to make it a 3-stage. We'll go to the next slide. The next slide is again the 200 series, which is the same thing. We have it in 2-stage, 3-stage, single stage, line filter, or with regulation. We have that. But the next slide, when we go with the line filter, I want to show you in the next slide that lower center picture, that Dan-Am regulator. I have one in front of me here too. But what's nice about this is this regulator is a 140 CFM regulator. It has a nice regulator valve screw on top that's easy to turn with a big gauge so you can see it. It comes with a mounting bracket. It comes with a 2-port manifold, high flow couplers and fittings already installed. It's just a great system. And this is what should be mounted inside your paint booth. So if you're mounting this in the booth, that's all you need in there. You don't need the filter in there that's exhausting water or oils and things back into your booth. But the SATA filter does come with a clear hose on that drain valve that you really need to drill a hole and run it to outside the booth or down underneath if you have a fully pitted booth where you can run it into the pit under your filters. So, because you really don't want to be venting all of your contaminants right back into your paint jobs. So we'll click to the next slide. This is just something that we have your distributor bring it in, or one of our reps can come in and do an air check. It's a mirror, but it has a metallic surface underneath and a coating on the top that lets the moisture and oil vapors and everything, it'll pool right up on there and show if you have excessive humidity, if you have excessive oil, and then it may lead you to taking a little deeper look at how your airlines really are. Lastly, the next slide, it just talks about maintenance, but yes, that picture that I want you to see there is of 2 different options you have for drain valves. So in your shop, before you get to the paint department, if you've got a low point in your piping system, you can run a 1/2-inch drop down to this. It's just threaded 1/2-inch pipe thread at the top, the one on the left, and it has a fully automatic drain valve on there. So no electrical needed. Just simply thread that on and it will help to eliminate moisture before it gets into your paint booth area. The drain on the right is an auto drain that can hook to the bottom of your compressor or to your storage tank. You take out the bung in the bottom, and then you just get a bushing to go from the bottom of your tank into this 1/2-inch diameter hole on this. This one does have to plug in, where the one on the left doesn't, so you can use that in an explosion-proof area. But out by your compressor, you can plug this in, and there's 2 timers, one to set it. I want it to purge every 20 minutes or every hour. Another timer if you want it to go 2 seconds or 3 seconds. But it's a great way to have an auto drain on your compressor so you don't have to worry about if that's been drained or when, because we'll go in a lot of shops and their compressor runs nonstop because they've got an 80-gallon tank with 60 gallons of water in it and no room for air. So these are just a great way to evacuate that water. And then finally, the last slide. Just for example, this is the AirVision 5000, and hopefully we can do another one of these another day and just go through all the basics on safety. But this one, you'll see in the center, there's a carbon belt. If you can come back to me, I'll show you the difference in these 2. We've got a regulator valve that just has a regulator going to the hood. That's if you have carbon, a 3-stage fitting. This just is that's all the painter wears, and you wear that on a nice padded belt. The padded belt you just wear where on one hip you can wear your regulator. They just snap in on your hip, and on the other side you can wear either an air cooler or an air warmer, and your hood plugs into this belt unit. If you don't have 3-stage, then we have a carbon filter which has a carbon inside, but this carbon inside of this is a smaller carbon piece. It looks just like the large one in the filter, but it only lasts 3 months. So if you're only one painter in the shop, it may make sense to just get, if you only have a 2-stage filter, to go with that and just use the regulator with the carbon in it. But if you have the carbon on the wall, all I need is a regulator, and I only have one place to change carbon for multiple painters. So that may make more sense. So I think that's
Tony,
everything that I brought to go through. So hopefully we got some questions.
yeah, I think we got a few questions, but Tony, when you talked about the air compressor having, 60 gallons in an 80-gallon tank, it makes me think of when we were at the Skills USA competition, and you had hooked up your air filters for the painting part of the competition, and I think we pumped out about 100 gallons out of whatever their storage tank was. So we've seen that at that competition as well.
Yeah, that was the one in Louisville. That was a big surprise when we did that. We pumped water out for 3 days and thought we had it clear, and then they didn't tell us. They opened another compressor up for us to help out in another wing that filled it full again. So, yeah, that was that was a shocking one.
Yeah. So, when we look at all the air filtration stuff, it's kind of amazing how much technology on vehicles in every aspect has really changed over the years. Something as simple as filtering out your air, all the technology and all the information that goes into that so many people, I think, overlook. And that's why we wanted to do this episode of Repairer's Realm, because there are so many things out there that people just don't think about, and we're always overcomplicating different pieces. And I think that, just that simple maintenance and actually looking at what you have in your shop is a big part of having those clean jobs come out of that paint booth.
Well, and it isn't just in the paint booth anymore. We have a lot of things, you've got DAs and plastics welders and plasma torches and different things, a lot of things that need clean air. Even your lifts, in many cases that need clean air so they're not corroding and malfunctioning. And air is certainly a huge requirement for us in the paint world, and you got to make it clean.
Kind of going back to your PowerPoint, you did show a image of the air test kit that you provide.
Yep.
I've seen that in operation, and without having to hook up a filter to send out, get tested, you just hold it up to your air line at 2 bars, and then squeeze it for 30 seconds. You get immediate results, and to see that the contamination that I was experiencing in the shop I was working at, to have a definitive answer on what was going on real quick was real time saving.
Well, and we have also, there's test kits out there that are more substantial, but that one just gives you, as you said, a very, very fast look at it. And so when our representatives come in to demonstrate our spray guns or our hoods, and they all carry these filters on stands and on demo stands, and we'd rather go in and do the demonstration with clean air rather than try and do it with what might be causing the paint problems to begin with and have the same result.
So I just want to remind everyone, if you have questions during the live show here, that tab in the top right corner, you can submit your questions there. And if you're watching on demand, if you have questions, submit them to repairersrealm@i-car.com. And with that, it looks like we got a couple questions that did come in.
Yeah, looks like the first one, if not used often, do the filters need to be replaced?
Oh, yeah, that's a good question. We do hear that one quite often. It's they're on a time schedule, and we have maybe vocational schools or restoration shops or hot rod shops or a place where maybe they don't paint every day, and we get asked that, do I have to change them as often? And typically the answer should be yes. It should be on that schedule, because if they're sitting idle without airflow going through them every day or all the time, the risk is, especially if you're going to breathe that air, that you can end up with some mold or bacteria growing in those cartridges. So yes, it's recommended to change them on a regular basis, whether you use it constantly all day long or only occasionally.
And I think we got question number 2. With this filtration system, do you need a carbon monoxide monitor? Like the
That's a
old?
great question. Part of the NIOSH or OSHA requirements are in the U.S. that we have to have a CO monitor or a high heat alarm. The CO monitor is there to detect carbon monoxide. Compressors don't typically create carbon monoxide unless they're on fire, but they do create hydrocarbons and can push oil through, which we have two separate CO monitors that can detect that. Number one, we have what we call an X767 Plus. It's our bigger unit that is meant to be used. You plug them in after your filter, so there's a filter exit on this that you can see. We put hopefully you can see that. We put a plug in there. When we send out a CO monitor, the X767 Plus, it comes with a 1/2-inch pipe thread with a hole in the middle for a compression fitting to screw into and a sampling line that goes to your CO monitor so that it reads that. The CO monitors that we use are electrochemical sensors, so they detect CO, but they detect if you have paint fumes being sucked into your compressor, oil, hydrocarbons, all that kind of stuff. But you do need that. The alarm goes off at 10 parts per million on the X767 Plus. That one is designed if you have multiple booths, multiple painters, you mount it outside of a paint booth. It's got an extra loud buzzer in it, but we can even hook up separate sensor alarms to that are extra loud alarms, or even an air horn that we can hook up to that in a large shop where it might be extra noisy. We just introduced about a week ago a new one, though, using the same electrochemical sensors, called a X288 Sentinel. And the new Sentinel comes in a small plastic case that has a fitting in the top with a compression fitting that samples air goes in. Same setup comes with it. It hooks up to the end of your SATA filter, runs a sampling tube, and they come with 10 feet of that tube, and it goes into the box, and it has a vent on the box, and it's alarms at 10 parts per million. It's got an LED screen on it, a red blinking light, and an alarm that goes off. We would recommend that one being mounted like right outside the walk-in door of the paint booth, so that every time a painter would go in and out, he can look at it, and it tells us the parts per million, and it shows a green light if it's sensing and fine. But both are available. They are a requirement of OSHA to have a CO monitor. So great question.
All right, looks like our next one. What are the signs of filtration starting to fail?
Well, there's some obvious ones when we get people that will say, hey, there's something wrong with our filtration. We're getting a lot of fish eyes. And then when they look back and see that it's been 2.5, 3, 4 years since they changed the cartridge. So you can see contamination if you have oil, if you have heavy oil, if you change these regularly, you shouldn't see that at all. But typically it's whether it's our filter or anyone's, if they've had a lack of filter maintenance, a lot more dirt and debris in their paint jobs. It could be everything breaking down from, if they got black pipe, it could be threads breaking down, or it could have been from 20 years ago when they cut the threads into that pipe and it finally worked its way all the way through the system and got to your paint gun. It could be rust particles, debris from their airlines. It could be desiccant media. So usually the signs are, if you're having to run, let's say I've had a filter in place for years, and it used to be that I only had to have 65 pounds of line pressure at the filter to get 30 at the gun, and now I got to run 10, 15 more PSI. It can be that your filter cartridges are getting clogged, and you better take a look.
Okay, and now we have the last question. Do you still have to change the filters every 6 months, even if the volume of cars that are being painted is higher or lower than usual?
Okay, yeah, nope, and yep, and we kind of talked about that one in the first question, but it's the similar question. Yes, you do need to change those, simply because we don't need them growing bacteria while they sit without airflow constantly going across them. So it is a good question. Whoever's asked that, it is important to change them on a regular basis. These are every 6 months.
All right. Looks like that's the last question that we have. So thank you, everyone, for joining us today, and we'll see you again next month.
All right. Take care, you guys.